Shang Chi is finally out. I saw it and I have to be honest. I thought it was going to be terrible. All the marketing and promotion for this movie was about how it was going to be the first Asian superhero and is going to celebrate Chinese culture, and if you don't like it, you're probably racist. There wasn't much about the story or action to tell me if this movie was going to be good or not, and that usually means that it's not going to be a good movie. But to my surprise, I actually liked it. It definitely had its issues, but it was entertaining enough. But before I get ahead of myself, this is not a review. To those who have been paying attention, this movie that seems to have been tailor-made for a Chinese audience is the first MCU movie to not be shown in China. There's a lot of speculation about why this might be, but after seeing the movie myself, it became very clear why this movie was not shown in China. Now, you may notice that throughout this video, I'm going to be pretty critical of China, and you may think, oh, Kevin, you must really hate China, but that's not true. In fact, I actually really love China, and it's because I love China so much that's why I'm being so critical. So let's just call it tough love. There's a theory going around that China may be banning all Western movies in the future, and they're only going to be showing movies that are made in China. China's done this before with other industries. They've welcomed the Western business in, promising lots of money, only to have that product duplicated and then Western companies banned from the Chinese market. But it seems like China's doing the same thing here, starting with Shang Chi. Now, of course, that's just a theory, and so time will tell if that's actually true or not. Now, the purpose of this video is to find out the actual reason why it was banned. So first, let's look at what was Marvel trying to do with this movie, and we'll look at why are movies even banned in China in the first place. And then we'll look at the reason why this movie was banned, and then I'll tell you the reason it was actually banned. First, let's look at what Marvel was hoping for. They recognized that the MCU was lacking in Asian representation, so looking through their library of endless characters, they happened upon Shang Chi, the master of Kung Fu. It was perfect. An Asian character with ties to the Mandarin, which was already used in a previous Marvel film, not to mention he's Chinese, which is the market that Disney cares about the most. But they made the most common American mistake when it comes to dealing with China. That is, they think Chinese people care about the same things Americans care about. They think Chinese people are starved for representation. The fact is, not really. The CCP only lets in about 25 foreign films into China a year. Most of the movies shown in China are Chinese movies with a full Chinese cast, so representation isn't that big of an issue. Although a Marvel movie about Chinese people may be a little bit special, there's just not a lot of demand for it. But that's not the reason it was banned. Before we look at the reason why Shang-Chi was banned, let's first look at some other movies that were banned in China and find out why. We'll start with 7 Years in Tibet. This movie was banned because of its portrayal of Tibet as a sovereign nation and the portrayal of Chinese as the invading force. Now, China claims that Tibet has been part of China since ancient times, and so when they came in to occupy Tibet, they were just retaking the land that was previously theirs, that they lost for some reason. And this movie shows that Tibet not only was a better country before China came in, that China doesn't have any real claim over Tibet. This suggests that China's claim over Tibet is illegitimate. The next example is Tomb Raider: The Cradle of Life, which suggests China had an absent government and is actually being controlled by secret societies. This puts into question the legitimacy of the Chinese government. The last example I'm going to give you is Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Man's Chest. This was banned in China because of its depiction of cannibalism. Now, this is really interesting. Most people would say, yeah, it's gross, but why ban it? Well, let's just say that China has a history with cannibalism that it would like to sweep under the rug. And I don't mean like 1,000 years ago there was a group of savages that ate people. No, I'm talking about perfectly civilized people in the past 60 years. Of course, you've got the Great Famine in 1959 where some people resorted to eating each other to survive. But the real crazy events happened much later during the Cultural Revolution in the late 60s and early 70s. That is, the Guangxi Massacre. During this time, at least 100,000 people accused of being counter-revolutionaries were killed in the Guangxi province. Methods of slaughter included beheadings, beatings, live burials, stonings, drownings, boilings, and disemboweling. Thousands of people, including government officials, participated in cannibalism. On one account, in 1968, a geography instructor named Wushu Fang was beaten to death by students at Wushuan Middle School. His body was carried to a flat stone at the Xiang River, where another teacher was forced at gunpoint to rip out his heart and liver. Back at the school, the pupils barbecued and consumed the organs. Now, some historians have called this time period the largest case of cannibalism in history. This was in the 1970s. While people in the West were getting down with Soul Train, people in China were trying not to get eaten. But I digress. So why was Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest banned in China? Because the Chinese government doesn't want to risk having their ridiculous past resurface. What do all of these movies have in common? They make China and or the Chinese government look bad in the eyes of the Chinese people. Now let's go through some of the reasons why they say Shang Chi was banned in China. One of the most silly reasons is because the lead actors of the film, Simu Liu and Awkwafina, they just don't meet the Chinese standards of beauty. I mean, no offense, but it's true, they don't. Just take a quick look at Douyin, the Chinese version of TikTok, and you'll see what I mean with the headphone challenge, the paper challenge, the wrist challenge. I don't think Awkwafina would pass any of those challenges. Although I do find it funny that Chinese people are so quick to insult Simu. I mean, he looks so familiar. Where have I seen that face before? Oh well. Just because actors are ugly isn't a good reason to ban the movie. So why was the movie banned in China? A more plausible reason is because the main villain of the movie is the Mandarin, and the Mandarin was once named Fu Manchu, and Fu Manchu has been deemed a racist caricature of Asian stereotypes. Although the name has changed, a lot of people still say that it is the same character. I think most of this outrage in China is fake. Now let me explain. Before I get ahead of myself, let me tell you why I think so. The average American doesn't know about the link between Fu Manchu and the Mandarin, and I'm pretty sure way fewer Chinese people know this as well. So I doubt that 1.4 billion people in China feel offended. Plus, something people in the West often forget is, unlike in the US, Asian people in China are not a marginalized class. And China doesn't have a victim culture like the US does, and what they deem as politically correct is very different from the US. But I've seen the articles, the Twitter campaigns, the negative comments. This shows that Chinese people are very offended. But this to me seems like a Chinese trolling campaign. Now let me explain, but first I need to explain some things about current Chinese politics. Up until recently, China has used the Tao Guang Wang Hui, or keep a low profile. This approach has worked. They've kept a low profile while the rest of the world turns a blind eye to their violations of trade agreements, IP theft, and human rights abuses. But now China is implementing the Zhanglang Waijiao, or wolf warrior diplomacy. Wolf warrior diplomacy is confrontational and combative. They loudly denounce any criticism of China on social media and in interviews. This is what we're seeing here. Most of the negative reactions we see from this movie that are supposedly coming from Chinese people are likely coming from government-paid internet trolls like the 50 Cent Army or other organizations like the Little Pinks. The Chinese government knows our culture way better than we know their culture, and they know how to weaponize words against us. They know that U.S. industries will become petrified at the accusations of being deemed racist. They know that if they plant the idea that an organization is racist, that American people will attack said organization. Although this is a good play in the subversion of Western culture, it's still not the reason Shang-Chi was banned in China. Now, you've probably seen the articles of Simu Liu talking about his parents' negative experience growing up in China and saying that's the reason why it was banned. But this didn't come to the surface until long after it was announced that Shang-Chi was banned. Before I watched the movie, I speculated that Shang-Chi was banned in retaliation for Marvel hiring Chloe Zhao to direct The Eternals. Chloe Zhao has gone on record making very similar remarks about what it was like growing up in China. It was around this time that these remarks came to the surface that Shang-Chi, along with a handful of other Marvel movies, was announced to be banned in China. Now that I've seen the movie, though, I can tell you that there's very clear reasons why Shang Chi is banned in China. The basic plot of the movie is Shang Chi is raised to become an assassin, but then he runs away to America. He lives there in peace for 10 years, then his dad sends assassins to get him. He then returns to China with his best friend Katie, and he confronts his childhood and defeats his evil dad. I know I skipped a lot, but that's basically it in a nutshell, and more than enough to get it banned in China. If you didn't catch it, then let's look at the summary from another perspective. We see a Chinese dissident that has become Americanized. This Americanized Chinese dissident and his American friend go to China to defeat the evil Chinese bad guy. Is it obvious now why this movie was banned in China? There are other issues as well that deal with more current issues in China, such as the depiction of running away from China and the ability to travel freely and the idea of dual citizenship. Now you may think, what's the big deal? Well, I'll tell you. Lately, with COVID and worsening natural disasters and locust plagues and swine flu, as well as more strict crackdowns on religion and a handful of other issues, people who have the means to are looking for an escape route. This paired with the fact that China has seen its first decrease in population and the government's tendency to overreact has caused them to be more cautious about the content that the population consumes. Shang-Chi shows that if you don't like your situation, that you can just leave and live a better life somewhere else. So with all of these new developments in China, it's no wonder Shang-Chi was banned.